Depression and the war years. What you see in this photograph is this is a photograph that he had given to me. This is him here, and this is his middle brother and the oldest brother. What you see, what they're wearing, overalls and long sleeve shirt, they each owned 2 pairs of each, and that's all they owned. They went to school barefoot, they went to town barefoot most of the time, unless they were really putting on the dog, in which case they had an old pair of brogans that they would pass down from one to the other. They lived a life that most of us could not imagine, and in fact most of us, I think, could not survive. We are far too soft a people now. These were hard people, and they lived a very, very hard scrabble life. And he would tell these stories, and I would run back to my wife's childhood bedroom where where we were staying. You know, we'd put up our suitcase and all that. I'd write down every detail that I could, and I did this for about 10 years. And you know, slowly germinating in my head this idea that this could be a book. You know, you just got such remarkable tales, happy tales, a lot of tragic, violent tales. It was a very, very hard life. As I said, his father was an absolute psychopath who beat on all 3 of his boys whenever he got an opportunity. His mother was completely negligent. She had no interest at all in raising children. And the only love they had in their lives was each other. And that strength, that bond, was the only thing that kept them going. And I slowly got to know the man who was telling these stories. And he was as fascinating as the stories were. And here was somebody, and his brothers too, they had every right to be hard-drinking, hard-living sons of bitches. You know, nobody would have blamed them because it was such an awful childhood that they lived. Nobody would, nobody would blame them for being awful, and instead they went the other way. All 3 of them, wonderful, fine, upstanding men, great family men, good to their wives, good to their kids, very successful, very intelligent, very funny. They could just be monsters, but they went the other way. And I started wondering, what was it about them that made them that way? You know, why did nature win out over nurture, or the lack of nurturing? And that really became the genesis for the stories. Okay, how much must they have been as kids in order to get to the men that I saw? Because if you saw my father-in-law, he always had a little notebook in his back pocket, and in that notebook, I'm gonna cry, in that notebook was bank account, current balance. Every CD he owned, every other investment he had was written in that notebook, and scratched out so many times with an eraser, and with the current figures noted that the paper was wearing through page after page. And that notebook told him, you are not going back there. That was his reminder that you have a shield against that life. You don't have to go back. The middle brother, if you went into his kitchen, the first thing you would notice is that all the cabinet doors would not close, the pantry would not close, because these things were so stuffed with food. Every kind of junk food, every kind of canned goods, and the man was thin as a whippet. He didn't eat any of it. But every time he walked into his kitchen, all of that told him, you're not going back here. You don't have to go back. The oldest brother, he had a walk-in closet, and he had 35 suits and sports jackets, more than he could wear in a month if he wore a different one every day. And he would walk into that closet, and his clothes would tell him, you're not going back to that. So that was really the most inspiring part, and that was the reason I wrote this story. So I took a lot of the sense memories that my father-in-law had, how things smelled, how they tasted, how they felt, how they sounded, all of those things, and based a novel on events in his life, but used those things to sort of supplement it. The main storylines and all, they're fictitious. I was not interested in writing a memoir of him. There was no love, again, other than with his brothers, and I wanted a love story, or at least a burgeoning love story, something that's just starting to grow, because it's a coming-of-age story. There was none of that in his life, but I put one in. lots of events that happened in the book did not happen in real life. And a whole heap of things that happen in real life would never go in this book. And in fact, he would never tell me these stories. When I would get really engrossed in his tales, he would always stop and say, you understand, I'm giving you the PG-rated version of what happened in my life. The worst things that happened in my life, the worst things that I saw, the worst things that I experienced, I'll take to my grave. Nobody will ever know about it, because then it's like passing along a curse. Because then you'll have that in your head, and it'll make you upset. He says, you don't need that. So those go with me. They die with me. So there was no way I was going to write a memoir, because all the good stuff was, being held inside by this man. But the stories he told were remarkable stories, and I wrote down every one that I could. There's a friend of mine who is a World War II vet, and he was writing his memoir for his grandkids, and he had participated in D-Day, and he'd liberated some of the death camps, and was writing all that down. And he said that an old person is like a library. They have an entire life's experiences in their heads, and it's it's a library you can access, assuming that person still has those memories and can relay those memories. It's just this whole world that opens up to you. Well, I had access to an amazing library, because my father-in-law was articulate, he was funny, he was very poignant. Keep going, some of you were almost in tears. Yeah, so, anyway, who wouldn't want to write a story about a man like that? But there's no way you're going to write a memoir of him, because he is never going to open up. He had 70 years of scarring, psychic scarring, that, those stories were never going to get out. He was never going to let them out. So, I would, I approached him, told him I wanted to, novelize, fictionalize his childhood, and he was sort of amused by that, because who the hell cares? Why would anybody waste their time on that? But I said I wanted to waste my time on it, and would he mind reading some chapters to make sure I got some details right? And so he would make comments and give me little suggestions, like, what was it like to ride on a school bus? Well, their seats didn't go like ours, down the length of the bus. They had a long bench that ran the entire length of the bus, 2 benches on each side near the windows. And the girls all sat on one side, and the boys all sat on the other. Not because they had to, but, Lord, the girls wouldn't want to sit with the boys, and the boys no way are going to sit with the girls. Everybody had cooties. And canvas shades, no glass in the windows. There's a little canvas shade with a loop on the bottom, and you just hang it up on a little nail driven into the ceiling of the bus if you wanted to be able to look out. Little details like that you're not going to find in any book. You're only going to find it with somebody who lived it. The wood on the bus seats being polished, as he would say, to a fare-thee-well, like an ice rink. And so everybody had to hold on with one hand, otherwise you slide. Which, of course, I made my character do, slide up and down the bus, because nobody told him about it. So just great, great details like that. And I wrote the book, and I had an agent at the time. I had written a historical novel before this one, and my agent hadn't had any success selling that one. She took this one and failed with that one as well in New York, and we tried regional southern publishers and struck out. It was called Provenance at that time. And it was called Provenance because the main character, Roger Bud MacLeod, is obsessed with where he comes from and who his people are, where he belongs. And there's lots of joking in the story where people are misleading him about his origins, so it's no wonder that he's just obsessed with this. So, perfect title, a very literary title, Provenance. Well, she couldn't sell it. I moved on to a third book. This one in the drawer. That was 8 years ago. And I did nothing with it. I'd gone on to other projects. I wrote a kid's story for a nonprofit foundation called the Tiger Flight Foundation. Wonderful group of pilots who fly kids for free and teach them about becoming pilot in command of your life. And then I wrote a near future terrorism sex comedy. I invented a genre. Those stories sat in boxes.
Say that again, George.
Here's my pitch. It's a near future terrorism sex comedy. So, nothing happened with any of those stories. I went back to work full time and, just sort of got on with my life. And all these stories are sitting in boxes and sitting on my hard drive. And then I was here, July 13th, Bob? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, see that beautiful foam board poster of the mask, Toltec, terrific author named Alex Walker, and his publisher, Deeds Publishing, and Bob Babcock is the owner of Deeds Publishing. Wave to everybody, Bob. Thank you. So I was talking to Bob about a writers' conference that I do. Hey, Bill. Talking about a writers' conference that I do. I had an author bail on me, and I suddenly needed a speaker. And I thought Bob and Jan would have wonderful insights about marketing one's work after publication. So I was pitching that to him, and he said yes. I said wonderful. We talked about what we read, and he's written a number of books, and he asked me if I had written anything. And I can't have you sit on the floor.
No.
Sit on the comfy chair.
George, that's the throne.
Sit in the throne, please.
Just for a minute.
Okay. All right. So talking to Bob about what I've written. Well, I'm sad to say my father-in-law had passed away just 2 weeks before, and he was much on my mind. And so the book that I brought out, was naturally Provenance, not any of the other three that I'd written. Hadn't seen the light of day. And Bob said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Send it to me." And 4 days later, I had a publishing contract. It was Now, the problem with the book was the title. We didn't change anything of substance except for the title, and the title affected one other change in the story. As Bob pointed out, nobody knows what provenance means. Nobody can spell it. And the other portion of the population not covered by those two things confuses it with Peter Mail's Provence series. So there's no way we were going to do provenance. One of my favorite words has always been hardscrabble, and especially as it related to my father-in-law's life. It's just a perfect word to describe his upbringing. And so I'd suggested hardscrabble. Well, Bob did the sensible thing, and cover your ears, George, Susan, Mike. He went to Amazon and typed in hardscrabble and came back with about 53 books. That title has been used a lot. But I still like the title. I still like that word. And so it dawned on me that there is a road where lots of the action occurs in the story. So I said, well, why don't we change the name of the road to Hardscrabble Road, and we could use that, because only a few people have published books called Hardscrabble Road. So we like that title. Now this is just how crazy writers are. As soon as we made that decision, I should have been incredibly relieved, and actually I was. I slept really well until about 3 in the morning, and I sat bolt upright in the bed, because my God, we loved this picture for the cover. And they're not on a road. They're in a freaking creek. And how can it be Hardscrabble? I'm going to have to call it Hardscrabble Creek. That's a really dumb name. So Bob said, tell people the picture was taken from Hardscrabble. Perfect solution. That's the most practical solution.